a very bizarre situation.
Hi, everybody. My name's Ben Mathis-Lilley. I'm Slate's news blogger. I'm coming to you from my in-laws' house in Ohio, where I'm drinking beer out of a wine glass that says "Birthday Girl." I'm joined by Slate senior writer Ashley Feinberg, who is basically correspondent to some of the weirder parts of the political internet, become famous for her investigations of such issues as the guy who was probably supplying Donald Trump with his hair weave for several years, Mitt Romney's secret screen name, and most recently, the question of who flushed a toilet during online oral arguments at the Supreme Court. Welcome, Ashley.
Thanks so much. That was a great introduction, Ben. Great job.
So this is Wednesday Night Live. This is Slate's Wednesday Night Live. We're here to talk about news and politics, those two subjects that we all love reading about so much these days. And I thought I'd jump right in. You should put your questions in the comment section here, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. Jumping in with a question we got off Twitter from Texas-based journalist Christopher Hooks, who writes, "Here's a question. Why don't you guys ever do good tweets?" Christopher, thank you for reading, and thank you for your engagement. I actually believe that there's a mistake in that question, which he submitted through Twitter.
Go on.
Which is that all of the tweets I've ever done have been very good, and I think that the same is true of Ashley. So I'm actually going to request that Twitter append one of its new fact-checking stamps to that tweet by Christopher Hooks, which leads us into one of today's most pressing news topics, which is Donald Trump's tweets about voter fraud were tagged with a fact-checking stamp by Twitter. It's a new product they're rolling out. This has caused Donald Trump great concern, obviously, and he's threatened to shut down social media. I think maybe all of social media. As a response. Ashley, you're Slate's Twitter politics expert. Can you just describe the situation a little more for our viewers, and then and maybe tell us how you think it's gonna play out from here between Twitter and the president?
Yeah, I mean the question of whether Twitter can do anything about Donald Trump has been discussed and batted around since the campaign, I want to say. I did an interview with Jack when I asked him if there was ever any instance in which he would basically reprimand Trump, and he was hesitant to say anything. Jack Dorsey, Twitter's CEO, yeah. At Jack on Twitter, if you're interested in his tweets. And he was hesitant to say anything definitive. It seems that is still the case because now, even though Twitter has decided to start appending Trump's tweets with a little fact check tag, that was sort of came about because Trump was tweeting lies about coronavirus, which seemed to be the final straw. Like, he had tweeted lots of other insane things. If you've familiar with Donald Trump, you're aware of this.
Right.
And nothing seemed to sway Twitter towards doing anything to stop it. Why this was the final straw, I'm not entirely sure of. But so now, if you see a Trump tweet that is blatantly incorrect, you'll see a little thing that says, like, learn more about this, which doesn't really indicate that there's anything wrong right off the bat. But if you click it, you'll sort of get information from the CDC or the WHO or whoever is most pertinent. But then also you'll get tweets from politicians on both sides of the aisle to get a full story. So I don't think this is effective in terms of combating misinformation or lies in general, I do think it's really effective in terms of giving Donald Trump something to kind of shore up his base's rage against, because his entire campaign is going to be based around having some enemy to unite Republicans and Trump voters. And
Right.
he doesn't really have Obama or Hillary. He has Joe Biden, but he is the person most in power right now. And but social media itself is this sort of overarching nebulous category that Republicans love getting mad at, and
Right.
I mean everyone was getting mad at. I hate social media, and B is a just like a this thing that you can pretend is more in power than you are.
Right. Right. Right, because his whole campaign in 2016 was like, famously based around the idea of the swamp. And now that
I haven't heard about that. Go on.
now that he, of course, as many people have pointed out, kind of responsible for most of the swamp's problems, he needs something to complain about. And I guess social media and big tech is associated maybe in a lot of people's minds with liberalism, or just because I guess they're on the coast, and they're generally younger people who have like a more progressive social views. But it seems like it may be a mistake to assume that their incentives are towards promoting. They have an incentive to promote progressivism sometimes. I mean, I feel like you can talk more about this maybe, but bent over backwards to accommodate conservatives for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, Mark Zuckerberg is nominally liberal. I mean, Jack Dorsey is less so maybe, but like still socially progressive, or at least would identify as such. But the only real ideology driving any of them is making money, and that is ultimately what is going to be driving their decisions. Like Mark Zuckerberg even recently said he was getting tired of sort of pretending to like keep tweaking Facebook's feed towards some social good or some sort of like nebulous idea of doing least harm.
It's
And
exhausting. What an
yeah, I mean,
exhausting job.
I mean, the thing is, like, I would be tired if I was him too. But my solution would be to shut down the website, which is the only moral option at this point, because there's no fixing it. But that's somewhat besides the point. But I don't even remember what I was talking about.
Well, I'm curious. One of the questions I think we got asked in our the posts that were submitted, or the questions that were submitted before we got on, was like, is there a way to stop misinformation?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I mean,
no.
I have no idea what the answer to it is, but you're the kind of the expert on this subject, so I thought I'd put it to you.
Yeah, I mean, no. There's always going to be some degree of misinformation, and especially for okay, I remember what we're talking about now. As long as they're incentivized to basically keep people on their websites for as long as humanly possible and to keep using their websites, they're like actual morally correct choices are always going to be counterintuitive. Like encouraging people to like seek out true things is usually going to mean leaving this like insulated ecosystem of like anti-vaxxer communities and whatnot, because people like the CDC isn't creating these like huge devout following Facebook groups because like no one wants to fucking listen to the CDC for 24 hours a day. But
it's not addictive.
Yeah, it's not a community in the way that like anti-vaxxers are creating a community because they have this unifying thing, which is they understand that vaccines will kill their children, which is not true.
Right.
But just to be clear. But
that's I mean, that's actually a fun fact about the platform we're using. Slate Live and Slate's Facebook channel is actually the only remaining non-anti-vax group on Facebook. So we're happy to have everyone here for as long as that will remain true. I'm going to get to another one of the pre-submitted questions here. Why does the media, this is what one of our readers wrote, why does most of the media continue to try and extrapolate plausible policy positions out of Trump's incoherent hateful, irrational rants. It drives me nuts. The only question I think is really appropriate to Trump is, when are you going to resign, and variations thereon.
Mm-hmm.
Ashley, I think that's directed for you.
Uh, yeah. So, I mean, I think the "when are you going to resign" question is sort of just as pointless because just like with the other ones, he's not going to answer it. I mean, the reason the media continues to try to sort of turn him babbling about like having a fever dream where Wolf Blitzer like bathes him into like what that means for Syria is because that is the only thing they sort of understand how to do. Like traditional media has a set of rules in terms of like how you interact with the president and how you write about the president, and those rules do not take into account like what happens when your president's brain is no longer functioning. And there's like obviously the obvious answer is to deviate from these set of rules, but doing so means that they are no longer unbiased journalists because unbiased journalists don't speak ill of the president or do ad homs or
Right.
yeah. There's
Or
just
do something.
there's no way to sort of continue this facade of being this reasonable impartial voice while the person you are being impartial about is a fetid mass of like dirty leaves.
Yeah, like I wrote about this a little when George H.W. Bush died, and I thought it was the way he was talked about was actually, it was almost, it was like a disservice to the person he actually was. Like George H.W. Bush's like record of like as a public servant or like as an American was as someone he served in the war. He worked for the CIA. You know, he was around like a lot of these black ops, early years of the Cold War operations. You know, he was kind of a cutthroat guy for most of his life, and he clearly, you know, felt justified in doing what he did. He like believed in the mission of the CIA in the 1960s.
Who did it?
When he died, not only was that stuff just completely left out, you know, it just portrayed him as kind of like this benign, saintly grandfather. Is what I wrote, because that seemed to be the only mode in which pundits were capable of talking about the presidency, because it's a thing where you put on a picture of the White House at night and it's lit with the floodlights, and you play like music with trumpets in it, and you talk about the president, and like that way of selling the presidency just can't accommodate any other kind of person, whether it's something like, you know, what George Bush, the first George Bush, did during the Cold War, you know, kind of like the darker parts of American history, or Donald Trump's whole thing in general, obviously. We have a question. We have a live question. Since Ashley's specialty is weird stuff online, correct? Does the fact that Biden seems terribly technologically illiterate and technology averse make it more challenging to cover him?
First of all, how dare you? And second, I mean, no, because nothing the campaigns actually do come from the candidate themselves. Like the thing is, Biden's technological illiteracy, like what we see is if like a stream is like messing up or there's just some issue, that is his campaign fucking up, which is still very like all of it's very funny and like great for me because it's very funny to write about. The issue is that Trump is also technologically illiterate, but he's illiterate in the same way that like thousands and thousands of baby boomers also are. So he has like a very clear base that he's speaking to when he like accidentally like tweets the number 9 8 times. Like they understand what that means and they're all for it. Like there's no like Biden cohort that's like going nuts every time, I don't know, he like falls asleep on camera. But
right. I mean, he's right. He's a native. He speaks the language in a native way, which actually, I don't know. Maybe that's something I was going to ask you a second ago. We can talk about my many famously, egregiously, historically incorrect predictions and columns. But you predicted in Trump in 2016, or you wrote a column for Gawker or whatever they were calling it, right? Like, when is Trump going to drop out? And like a lot of people thought that he was going to drop out because he didn't want to be president, and people thought that until he was elected and during the transition and during his presidency. So I don't bring that up to say like, wow, you were way off base, because like it
No,
seemed like
I
a
love
very.
talking about it. Go on.
But I mean, so what is it? What do you have a personal theory? Like, what changed? Like, why does he want to be president now? Like, he clearly decided that he's going to do it.
Yeah, I mean, what was funny about that, the headline, I think, was something like when is Donald Trump going to quit? And it was like my first like stab at like making a prediction, because every time before then I was like, there's no way I know it's going to happen. Like, I'm going to be wrong. But I was like, finally now, like, I know what's going to happen. I can finally be right about something. And turns out I was not right. And I think what changed is just like bitterness, because even right after he won, there was a series of photos from when he first went to the White House to meet Obama. When he like, remember him like shaking his hand and like being walked around by Paul Ryan to like go see where he was going to be inaugurated. Where if you like zoom in on his face, like it is such a pure expression of just like fear and distress, and like it's very, very clear that like that might have been the only moment it happened, but for that moment he knew exactly what he had just happened and like what he was about to have to do, and he was devastated over it. But I think that like then the inauguration happened, and then he got to keep going around to rallies, and he got all these people to get mad at online. And I mean,
Yeah,
it's like spite now. I think that the thing that is driving him is spite and rage, which is all
right. I mean,
really.
like you could think you can kind of model it as that moment of fear and distress was him kind of contemplating the idea of like doing the actual job, and then mentioning the inauguration. I think that makes sense, because like he immediately gets into this fight with everyone about how many people were there in the picture, right? Like this stupid thing.
That, yeah.
Yeah, made Sean Spicer go out and say that there was actually 500 times as many people as were there for Obama, and like put up the picture and circle the area and say like, well, this was because of the magnetometers and all this shit. And like he just went with that, and that's the way he like manages coronavirus too. So like it's like, you're right, he figured out how to make it small, make the office small enough for him. And to go back to that first question, like the press, like for much of the press, I guess when we say the press, we're talking about like some major newspapers and cable networks and networks still haven't quite figured out how do you adapt to that. But you can't. I don't. That's the other thing. Like, I don't know if there's really a useful way to engage at a press conference with the president, whose only purpose at the press conference is to pick a fight and make you look bad and do something ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, there's no useful thing to get out of it. The one thing I have very, very, very much wanted the White House press corps to do, or really anyone who just has like a minute to like ask him a question, is to just ask him questions of like basic fact, like ask him what FISA stands for, like ask him who like the prime minister of literally any country is that's not England. Like,
right.
I like these. There's no way for him to like. I mean, I'm sure there's a way for him to bullshit out of it, but that seems to me to be the most useful amount of time, because like there's no point in trying to get actual information out of him, so you might as well just try to embarrass him.
And I mean, you could kind of argue that like just trying to demonstrate the level of sophistication or understanding or lack thereof that the president has would be a useful public service. Britt asked, that last question was from Christine Mellon. Thank you, Christine. The next question is from Britt. This is also, I think a lot of these are going to be directed, essentially, implicitly directed toward Ashley. What stories are your white whales? And I guess that would probably mean like, what is something like you're investigating that you haven't nailed down? That's a question from DC.
DC Chillist. What's your white whale, Ben?
as an opinion blogger, like I can kind of say whatever I want at any time, and as my like whatever year 2009. Maybe they can get a picture of this headshot, a screenshot of this for later. My 2009 Slate piece. Don't worry about Conan O'Brien. He's going to be great as the host of the Tonight Show. Indicates I can kind of just go with something, and it doesn't have to necessarily be as backed up and nailed down as some of Ashley's pieces. But I don't know, a subject like I'm always trying to write about is like I think that the way small businesses are discussed and what, like the function of the idea of small business in politics is always very funny to me, because like when you say small business when you're a politician, you just mean like the most honorable, high integrity, like
It's a troop. You're basically talking about a troop.
yeah, exactly. Fabric of the community, mom and pop shop. And like obviously stores like that exist, like many stores like that exist,
Like
but like
the troop store, yeah.
actual small businesses are like often run by deadbeat weirdos. And like we all know that. Like everyone uses businesses and patronizes businesses and knows that like sometimes like a gym my wife used to go to a gym where like they clearly they were running out of money and were just starting to take things out of people's lockers, like and then the gym was just like one day the gym just didn't exist anymore, like there just wasn't anyone there. Like, that's also a small business, and everyone has that experience. And I think that it's I mean, and I thought for sure this is going to kind of get brought up. This was always like one of the reasons for my, many people predicted incorrectly that Trump would kind of fade as a candidate or wouldn't win. My thought was just that like everybody, no matter where you're from, I'm from Michigan, like central Michigan. Like as soon as you read about like what Trump does with his real estate, you recognize that as like there's a local character like that. And just someone everyone knows is kind of like a sleazy business guy. And I was just shocked that like that trope wasn't more recognizable to people, that like people, swing voters did not just register him as that kind of person. And instead, what they seem to have registered him as like the super successful, like smart, sharp on top of it CEO from TV, so I was just wrong because I guess I just like didn't watch that TV show. But I've always kind of wanted to write about that idea.
But I don't know. I think people did recognize it, and that was sort of like part of the appeal. It was, I mean, there was the misconception that he had a lot more money than he did, but like the fact that he would do whatever it takes to win, like that's what he's going to do for the country, and like that's why we need a president who like his only scruples are what's good for America and what's good for me.
Right, like that guy always does actually end up getting his hotel built, even if he like defrauds people to do it. And and the walls are filled with asbestos. It's like he's going to do that. Right, that was that idea. Like he's going to do that, but for America, and I guess
for America. Speaking of Trump, here's a question for you from Bill Tell.
Yes.
It says, in Tom Tillis's new campaign ad, in which he takes a walking tour of a mobile home park and speaks earnestly of his hardscrabble upbringing, but never mentions Trump or any Trumpian themes, more likely to help him or hurt him with the all-important white suburban woman demographic in North Carolina?
I thought that was a great question too, and I had flagged it just to credit user Bill Tell, Slate Plus member Bill Tell, with the observation. I hadn't seen that ad. I watched it when I saw that question. It is a good ad. It's nicely shot. It's nicely lit. There's like a kid and they're moving out of a trailer, and then Tom Tillis comes in and talks about how his childhood was like this. It seems like it's probably smart right now, given that Trump is a little is losing to Biden a little bit in North Carolina, and like kind of the accepted conventional read on polling right now is that Trump is losing. He's particularly losing suburban white women that he won or won a kind of a crucial portion of in 2016, and and now older people as well because of the coronavirus. I think so great point, Bill tell. Thank you for pointing that out. I think it will be very interesting. I think that the question becomes, what other candidates do we see this from? So, Cory Gardner in Colorado, Martha McSally in Arizona, Susan Collins in Maine. Are we going to see those candidates start running on something besides their connection to the president from their party? Which seems like it'd be difficult because there is just nothing going on in the party besides the president. I mean, there's no meaningful opposition to him. There's not really anything. Their entire program in the Senate is to not pass anything. So, I mean, it does make it difficult.
But didn't Tom Tillis do that in the ad?
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying, we'll see if that works. I mean, I thought it was a good ad. And, it's definitely, if you rolled me out of bed and told me I was consulting for Tom Tillis, it seemed like I liked it. I liked him when I got done watching the ad, for 30 seconds. I thought, he seems like a good guy. He understands normal people,
He understands me.
Yeah. In interesting life history. Apparently, self-taught computer guy went on to work for IBM. But so maybe we'll see some more about those later years in some further campaign messaging from Senator Tim. Yeah. I thought that was a good segue for another question we got earlier, which was about Elizabeth Warren and Joe Biden. How did we end up with Biden when Warren was the obvious unity candidate? This question possibly came from my mom because I wrote several posts toward the end of Warren's campaign, kind of pointing out with increasing desperation what I believe to be the evidence that she was the obvious unity candidate for Democrats. And I think that the answer goes back to those states we're just talking about, North Carolina, Arizona especially, and then Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. Warren, we've seen there's been a lot of polls about who do Democrats want as vice president? Who's going to make them more excited to vote for the ticket? Warren is a popular person with a lot of the parts of the Democratic Party.
I haven't seen the polling on that, I don't think.
She just, she tends to do better than any of the other choices that are out there. And so the polls are putting her up against Kamala Harris, Stacey Abrams, Gretchen Whitmer, a lot of the people who are being considered because Biden has said that he will nominate a woman to running mate. So that's why she's not getting pulled against Bernie Sanders, for example. But she's just, she's well known. She's still well liked even after the primary. More subjectively, she seems to have more connections inside the party, more friends inside the party than Bernie Sanders has. Obviously, she's actually a registered Democrat, didn't call herself an independent for a long time. Slightly less extreme positions, style of rhetoric. So, yeah, I think Warren was a good unity candidate, but I think what voters, the way I kind of think of it, I kind of think of these things as I put an explanation to my head for as long as it makes sense, and then something comes along to show me how wrong I was. But the way I currently think of it is just voters in the states that were voting on Super Tuesday and turned out to be decisive just were really obsessed with electability. It's the kind of thing where you could have cut from April 2019 to now, and you could have missed everything that happened, and you would have had the correct explanation for what was going on, which is that people voted for Joe Biden because they were concerned that Sanders and Warren Sanders was too radical, and that Warren was a woman, and that they needed to nominate a more middle of the road white guy. And it's unpleasant to me, but that was correct. I mean, so far Biden has because of coronavirus and because he didn't do a lot of events even before the coronavirus, done nothing. I mean, not really anything as a candidate. Certainly nothing that's made national news. Even until he said that you're voting for Trump instead of Biden, you're not black. That was the first real Biden moment that cut through. And wearing the mask, give him credit. He wore the mask, wore a mask outside this weekend. But Biden hasn't done anything, and he's doing very well in Arizona, and he's winning the polls in Wisconsin and Michigan. And and Sanders and Warren were just a little closer in those states when that state by state polling was going on in the primary. So there is a contingent of, I guess, that swing vote in those states that is more amenable to Biden than to those other people.
But like for the electability thing, I mean, I think that is our fault in so much as like our means like the media in general, because the reason people care about electability is because like if you watch CNN or MSNBC or even just like Fox or anything, like it was constantly talking about like this person like can't win, and like voters, like telling voters they care about electability makes voters care about electability, and like the media is sort of dictating like who they see as the most electable in turn makes them the most electable because that is what voters have been told they're supposed to want. It's like this like just sort of impossible cycle that like self-determines itself.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that the way that a lot of writers play it up is irresponsible. I guess I had this argument with our both of our editor Tom, who I think shares your opinion on that. It was just that the media and like the Democratic Party itself. I mean, Nancy Pelosi was doing interviews when she was saying, we can't do this Bernie stuff. Like it's too radical. We're gonna lose. Like so that message is certainly reinforced by a lot of people, and I think it gets way overplayed relative to its importance. Like I definitely think the polls also showed that Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren or Pete Buttigieg could have won the election as well. At the same time, I think that there is just a cohort, a small slice of people who don't actually pay that much attention to the news and but Biden is pulling well ahead of Hillary. And I mean, how many differences are there between Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton in terms of, tangible political differences? I don't think that many. They both worked in the Obama administration. And I think that they're like, just is a subset of people who like Biden better because he seems like a dude.
I mean, he is a dude, but like I know what you mean.
Yeah, and I don't like that exists, and like I think obviously the candidates should be judged on their own merits, and like a woman could but like I also don't think it's wrong. Like Joe Biden just is doing better in Arizona and Pennsylvania than Hillary Clinton did, and that Elizabeth Warren was doing. And like I think that's a little ridiculous, but like the voters spoke.
Ally,
What's that?
Thank you for being an ally.
Yeah. I had to put a lot of caveats into that.
Let's see what's next. What do we got next?
So this is a more serious topic, I guess. A couple people asked why Slate doesn't do a little more to cover white nationalism, and then also sort of relatedly, why Slate was slower than some other sites to cover the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis, a black man who was killed by a police officer with a knee on his neck, and that was captured on video, and that happened a few days ago. And I think that's true. Slate didn't have an article as fast as some other sites, but I believe you wanted to field that one.
Yeah, I mean it's a not very interesting answer, but I mean I think a lot of it is the fact that it's a smaller staff, but also just like the New York centric bias is very real, I think, and there's sort of like a reason we were much quicker to cover like race-based issues that happen in New York versus in any other state, just because we're biased towards things that feel more immediately present. And I mean the other thing is just like there's so much that happens that we don't cover that, and I'm sure we could prioritize better than we do, but it's sort of just also a matter of just like who's online at the time and who has a minute to write something up.
Yeah, I think that's true. Right. Like we're how many people do we have writing full time about news? Like, I don't know, 6 or 7. I mean, obviously everyone writes about the news.
That's higher than I would have thought. Yeah.
Yeah. But like breaking news, we don't have like a large breaking news department. So I think that there is a sense in which we kind of like look for what's bubbling up. And so we are relying, I mean, I'm honest about this. I rely on social media to tell me what's important, like what stories are important sometimes. And I think that like on the example of George Floyd, like obviously like it got, it became it became a national story, and we'll have more coverage of it coming up in the next few days. But yeah, I think a lot of times that there's a story that's not happening in Washington D.C. or related to Trump in some way, or related to the Democrat primary field, or Joe Biden, that we will probably be slower to it. And then I guess I wanted to talk about the white nationalism thing a little. And I can only speak for myself here, which I used to cover that kind of, I mean, I used to kind of be on that beat a lot during the Trump campaign, and then during Charlottesville, and even before that, with what we saw, the backlash to Black Lives Matter. I think that was obviously a big story for a long time. I wouldn't say at all that it's not as big a story now. I think that the truth is just depressing, which is just that that's now a faction in American politics. Mm-hmm. So you don't write a story every day saying that, there's some moderate Democrats, like the white nationalist, like kind of neo-Nazi wing of the far right is just like a part of politics. So it's like, you're not going to cover every time they do something, because it's just, that's like a certain chunk of the electorate, and that's a certain chunk of like the group that holds sway over politicians. And so, it certainly didn't become less of a threat or less of an upsetting thing, but it just became more a part of, like probably out of all the things that people say, like, put me in a time machine, put me from 10 years ago in a time machine and show me what's happening now, like Donald Trump is the president. But like the fact that like these white nationalist groups are like Stephen Miller and Steve Bannon's like affiliations with these kind of people were very, very open. And I wrote about it a bunch at the beginning of the presidency. And like, I don't think it's not like people like it, but enough people don't mind.
Some people like it, but yeah.
Yeah. I mean, just enough people don't mind that like, you can't force someone to resign anymore just by showing that they have a connection to like American Renaissance or one of the super far right.
Insane thing to think about when you like say it out loud.
But yeah, it's right. It's like, I mean, that's just like, that was a real rule of politics. And I think that a good example to look at is Steve King. Like Steve King has had these connections for a long time. And, the more prominent these groups got, the more people I think the more there was more of a backlash against him. Like he almost lost in 2018 or 16, sorry. 18. There was more of a backlash against him, but he's still in office, and he didn't have his committee assignment stripped until he said, like, I think white supremacy is good. Like that is a very slight paraphrase of what Steve King said. Like he had to say,
and I think it was like, he's still like there.
Yeah. And so, right, like that, he had to literally say the words, like, I believe that it's fine to be a white supremacist before, like, it registered as enough of a upsetting thing to people. And again, he didn't resign. He just, like, isn't on the Ag Committee anymore.
Yeah. I hate to change the subject, but it appears my stepdad has asked a question. And as I've had this conversation with him before, I'm going to pose it to you, Ben.
Okay.
Here is my stepdad's question. It says, I still don't understand why all of you young journalists remain silent on the admission from Obama's advisor, Ben Rhodes, intentionally lying to y'all to gain positive press for the Iran agreement. Ben?
It's Steve. Steve is your stepdad's name?
Yeah.
Thank you, Steve. That's a great question. Foreign policy is not my area of specialty. However, I think that so I'm ducking that question a little bit, because I don't actually remember what specific thing that Ben Rhodes lied to me, the collective me, about to gain positive press for the Iran agreement. But I would say that like there's a certain amount of like normal political lying that like gets basically excused by the press, and I think that kind of covers for both. Like I think that goes for both parties. I don't think that Obama. I mean. Steve could look up my comments on Obama's former press secretary, Jay Carney, who now works for Amazon. I've been quite critical of Mr. Carney and his level of candor. Robert Gibbs, also Obama press secretary, who I've been critical of. So, yeah, I mean, I I feel like the implication here is that this is that the whatever Ben Rhodes did with in regards to Iran is analogous to the Trump administration's, and I don't think that's true. So I just don't think that's true. I don't think that there's like a parallel between. I don't think that there's a parallel between what Obama did and what Trump and what the Trumps do. I mean, this is like the Hillary's emails question, basically. Like, I think it was sneaky, and Hillary knew she was not following the rules to have her email account, but like that
Yeah, I mean, it
was
was
not
bad, but there are worse things that like deserve more attention than
right. To have
this.
that be given
Yeah.
a same weight as like the number of sexual assault accusations against Trump, I don't think that would be the most accurate and truthful way to convey the news, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I have lots of problems with things Ben Rhodes did. I have significantly greater problems with things the Trump administration is currently doing, which is the
Yeah.
reason I am not constantly tweeting about Ben Rhodes.
Well, and so I think that's a good segue. We had got another question. It was about our coverage of Tara Reid, who had accused Joe Biden of sexual assault. The question was from someone who felt we overcovered it, I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. It seemed to be the question comes from someone who's a Biden supporter who believed that we had given it too much attention. And I think that's actually a good example. I think the Tara Reid, I have no problem with the way we covered Tara Reid. I'm sure you don't either. Mm-hmm. That story did kind of come out of the right-wing media. And I think that like there are these stories that the right-wing press will be covering, and they'll be covered in the kind of with this framework or the tone of like, oh, you'll never see the liberal media write about this. But then like a lot of the times the liberal media will write about it if it's a story that's credible. Like, and yeah, it comes out of the right-wing press, but like it's not. I mean, did Tara Reid not get covered on Slate because she was originally giving some interviews to right-wing outlets? Like, I don't think so. Like, did the Al Franken allegations not get covered because they came from someone who's a Fox News commentator? No. Like, I think that the mainstream press, like as we've already discussed, has like plenty of blind spots, but like ignoring stories that might damage a Democrat, I don't see that. And from the criticism from the other side is, I guess, that we gave Tara Reid too much attention because we're in the tank for Bernie Sanders, I think is the idea, probably.
Yeah, I mean, I get this a lot. Like, anytime I say anything negative about Biden on Twitter, there will be like 5 people like screaming at me or like telling me that Bernie lost, which I'm fully aware of. Like, these things aren't about him. Like, the thing is, like, I would be making fun of any candidate who is the candidate just because that is the thing I enjoy the most. And like, Bernie Sanders has no bearing on that, but also, yeah, I mean, Biden was not my preferred choice, and I like am still much harder on Trump, I think. Like, I forgive some things from Biden that I probably wouldn't if he wasn't the candidate, which is not necessarily great, but it's a fact of what's happening. But yeah, I mean, none of the like Biden attacks are because there's some like dream that like Warren or Bernie or whoever is going to like swoop in and like take the mantle of the candidacy. Like that's not in the calculations.
Right. I feel like I can speak for a lot of like left-leaning like journalists when it's like, if anything, there was a reluctance to cover Reid because it was like, well, we just got done with this primary and Biden's the nominee, and like, like let's not go back. Let's not go back to just having to decide who the nominee is again. I feel like there was like kind of like a fatigue from the primary.
Definitely.
Question.
Here's a question for you. Would there be any real political blowback to abolishing the filibuster? Like, would there be any actual price to pay? It didn't seem like there was over similarly outrageous maneuvers like the Merrick Garland handling.
Yeah, I think the answer to this is no. I don't see any possibility of that. I can't picture in my mind what constituency it would come from. Like, I think that the only people who would object would be kind of like the people who, maybe some people on MSNBC and a couple of people who write op-eds for the New York Times. But Like as we saw basically with the Howard Schultz candidacy and the Bloomberg candidacy, like there's not like that's not like a very big part of the election. And I think I mean, this is obviously in the context of if Joe Biden wins and he's trying to pass extra Obamacare or whatever, will Chuck Schumer, abolish the filibuster so that it can get passed? I think the Democrats are going to be so motivated to pass whatever it is they're trying to pass that they will not care at all. And Republicans will complain, but swing voters they won't care. Like that's like I mean, what have we seen in the last 4 years that shows us that like a commitment to like the precepts of like constitutional democracy is like a real interest in American elections? I don't really see it. Question from Jason Feinberg. Is that
That's
also?
Okay. That is my brother. Yes.
Okay.
I can give a little background to this question. Jason Feinberg asks, "How will third-party candidates perform in this election?" And I believe the reason he was asking this question is that the other day he texted me and asked me if he would be a bad person if he voted for the Green Party. And I told him that, yes, I think probably he would. I mean, realistically, he lives in Texas, and his vote's not going to make a difference. So theoretically, he can do whatever he wants. I still think that as much as Joe Biden is not my preferred candidate, like he is, I think objectively, I mean, he should be president in place of Donald Trump. Like Donald Trump should not be the president for another 4 years. That would do irrevocable harm to like a large number of people. I don't think that's a question, but technically the question was how will third-party candidates perform in this election. So Ben, what do you say to that?
What are they? Who are they?
I don't know.
No, it's not Justin Amash, right? So he
no, he's out. Yeah.
2 weeks. Yeah. So I think the answer to that is poorly.
Yeah, I mean that's generally always the answer. But yeah, Jason can vote however he wants because Texas is going to go for Trump.
Another press question: as reporters and journalist adjacent writers, thank you. Are you angry that it's taken 3+ years for the press pool to finally figure out how to band together and call out the lies and idiocy of both Trump and his press secretaries?
Yeah, I mean, it was infuriating watching, especially when there was the entire press corps was still allowed to attend the press hearings when whoever the fuck it was, Spicer or Anthony Scaramucci or Sarah Huckabee Sanders or whoever was, would like basically just like shit on a reporter and like try to move past them, that they wouldn't just keep handing the microphone back. It seemed like such an obvious tactic to sort of band together and like get any sort of real answer out of this person who clearly did not want to answer the specific question, which seems like the thing a journalist should most want to pursue. It was really fucking frustrating, and they're finally figuring out, or I shouldn't even say all of them, there's like 3 of them, I think, who are starting to sort of realize that they don't need to sort of take Kayleigh McEnany's bullshit, I guess. That's how you say her name, like Kayleigh McEnany?
No one knows.
That sounds right to me. But yeah, and I mean, God knows how long this will last, and I don't know if part of it is just the fact that there are less of them there currently, so it seems easier to sort of push back. But yeah, I mean, I'm not confident that this sort of newfound rebelliousness in the press corps will last past another month, but I hope it does.
Yeah. Well, I think that that we are coming to the end of our time here. I wondered if you wanted to give any preview of what investigations you might be working on for what we can tell from the question, the many fans. Actually, you know what? I want to ask that question, but I also want to ask first, if you've gotten any feedback directly or indirectly from Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer for concluding that he used the toilet and flushed it during Supreme Court arguments. Did you hear anything through Supreme Court back channels?
I had not heard anything from Supreme Court back channels. I did notice or I didn't notice. My attention was called to the fact that the next day, he declined to speak during his turn, which I prefer to think was due to me. I'm sure it was due to the fact that he just didn't have anything to say. But as in lieu of any sort of direct confirmation, I will take that as such.
Right, right. I think that's the right takeaway. And are you
Thank
working on
you.
anything that you need to? Do you want to solicit tips for any of your next project? Anything like that?
Uh, Yeah, well, sort of going back to the white whale question, one thing I have been told repeatedly is that Hillary Clinton does have a burner Twitter account that she uses. That like she doesn't tweet from it, but like she follows a certain number of people, and I'm sure like she's faved something at some point. I have never been able to find it or even have like any sort of inkling that like I might be on the right track. So if anyone out there does know what it is or has any idea that isn't just trying to fuck with me, please send me an email at ashley@slate.com. I would love to hear from you.
Okay, so I think that yes, help Ashley your reporting on Hillary Clinton. This is the end of Wednesday Night Live. Thank you for watching and participating. And please come back next week when we'll have a
Someone who's
special.
not us will be here. Yeah.
We'll have a special Pride edition with the Outward team. All right, guys. Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.